right, Shalom. First and foremost, we'd like to give all honor and glory and praise unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakadash. Double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, to all the Akim out there teaching and preaching this truth with 144% sincerity, to the men, women, and children listen learning to the Ba'asher Debadat, the house of David. We say Shalom. All right, I'm Ayash Shatab.
I'm Darash.
I'm Karatza.
All right, and we're coming to you through the will and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai on Art of War series. I think it's 9?
Part 9, yes.
God, part 9. All right, but without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into these scripts.
All right, this is going to be chapter 9 of the Art of War series. It's called The Army on the March. And it says, Sun Tzu said, "We come now to the question of encamping the army and observing signs of the enemy. Pass quickly over mountains and keep in the neighborhood of valleys." Can you get Colossians 4 and 5?
It's going to be the book of Colossians, chapter 4 and verse 5. And it reads, "Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time." Salakia.
So, with wisdom, we're going to walk with wisdom towards those without, because redeeming the time, which is, observing the signs of what's going on, and that as well as means observing the signs of our enemies as well, knowing what's going on and what to do when and use wisdom to to maneuver.
God.
That's one of the many. That's part of using strategy. Next it says, "Camp in high places facing the sun. Do not climb heights in order to fight. So much for mountain warfare. After crossing a river, you should get far away from it. When an invading force crosses a river in its onward march, do not advance to meet it in midstream. It will be best to let half the army get across, and then deliver your attack. If you're anxious to fight, you should not go to meet the invader near a river which he has to cross. Moor your craft higher up than the enemy, and facing the sun. Do not move upstream to meet the enemy. So much for river warfare. In crossing salt marshes, your sole concern should be to get over them quickly without any delay. If forced to fight in a salt marsh, you should have water and grass near you, and get your back to a clump of trees. So much for operations in salt marshes. In dry, level country, take up an easily accessible position with rising ground to your right and on your rear, so that the danger may be in front and safety lie behind. So much for campaigning in flat country. These are the 4 useful branches of military knowledge which enabled the Yellow Emperor to vanquish 4 several sovereigns." Psalms 95, chapter 95, verse 4 through 5.
This Psalms chapter 95 and verse 4 says, in his hand are the deep places of the earth. The strength of the hills is his also. The sea is his and he made it, and his hands formed the dry land.
So that's talking about the elements of the world, and knowing how they're made and how they're used and how you could use them to your advantage in the art of war. And because of that, that's how it says how the Emperor vanquished 4 several sons, because he knew the terrain, he knew how it worked, the sea, and all that. Next it says, "All armies prefer high ground to low, and sunny places to dark. If you are careful of your men and camp on hard ground, the army will be free from disease of every kind, and this will spell victory. When you come to a hill or a bank, occupy the sunny side with the slope on your right rear. Thus you will at once act for the benefit of your soldiers and utilize the natural advantages of the ground. When, in consequence of heavy rains, up country, a river which you wish to ford is swollen and flecked with foam, you must wait until it subsides. Country in which there are precipitous cliffs with torrents running between, deep natural hollows, confined spaces, tangled thickets, quagmires, and crevices should be left with all possible speed and not approached. While we keep away from such places, we should get the enemy to approach them while we face them. We should let the enemy have them on his rear. If in the neighborhood of your camp there should be any hilly country, ponds surrounded by aquatic grass, hollow basins filled with reeds, or woods with thick undergrowth, they must be carefully rooted out and searched, for these are places where men in ambush or insidious spies are likely to be lurking. Proverbs 4:26.
Let's go to Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 26. It says, "For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken." Oh no, that was 3:26. Lucky. Proverbs 4:26. "Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established."
So, by pondering the path of your feet, you have to, before you make a move, you have to think. Think before you make a move. What would I do in this situation? What would I do if I make this decision? What would I do if I make that decision? You have to think before.
Not in haste.
Not in haste. So you have to be cautious of your moves. It's like, the same thing playing a game of chess. Where should I go? Where should I move next? Alright, and now it says, when the enemy is close at hand and remains quiet, he is relying on the natural strength of his position. When he keeps aloof and tries to provoke a battle, he is anxious for the other side to advance. If his place of encampment is easy of access, he is tendering a bait. Movement amongst the trees of a forest shows that the enemy is advancing. The appearance of a number of screens in the midst of thick grass means that the enemy wants to make us suspicious. The rising of birds in their flight is the sign of an ambuscade. Startled beasts indicate that a sudden attack is coming. When there is dust rising in a high column, it is the sign of chariots advancing. When the dust is low, but spread over a wide area, it betokens the approach of infantry. When it branches out in different directions, it shows that parties have been sent to collect firewood. A few clouds of dust moving to and fro signify that the army is encamping. Humble words and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. Violent language and driving forward as if to the attack are signs that he will retreat. When the light chariots come out first and take up a position on the wings, it is a sign that the enemy is forming for battle. Peace proposals unaccompanied by a sworn covenant indicate a plot. So, when there is much running about and the soldiers fall into rank, it means that the critical moment has come. Excuse me. When some are seen advancing and some retreating, it is a lure. When the soldiers stand leaning on their... it is a lure, slide. So, can you get 1 Peter 5:8?
Book of 1 Peter, Salakia. Chapter 5 and verse 8, and it reads, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour."
So, after all that I just read, that shows that those are examples of what this devil might try to do or use to get you. He'll use whatever means necessary to get you in that snare, and then he's got you. So you have to be wary of that. Keep an eye open. Now it says, when the soldiers stand leaning on their spears, they are faint from want of food. If those who are sent to draw water begin by drinking themselves, the army is suffering from thirst. If the enemy sees an advantage to be gained and makes no effort to secure it, the soldiers are exhausted. If birds gather on any spot, it is unoccupied. Clamor by night betokens nervousness. So, 2nd Esdras chapter 16, verse 22.
Second Esdras, chapter 16 and verse 22. And it reads, "For many of them that dwell upon the earth shall perish of famine, and others that escape hunger shall the sword destroy."
And that famine's talking about the food and thirst, and by other means, when people on a famine, people are not only just hungry and thirsty, but they're exhausted, and eventually they die because they can't get that substance, and they perish by the sword, by a weapon. All right, next we got if there is disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the banner and flags are shifted about, sedition is afoot. If the officers are angry, it means that the men are weary. When an army feeds its horses with grain and kills its cattle for food, and when the men do not hang their cooking pots over the campfires, showing that they will not return to their tents, you may know that they are determined to fight to the death. The sight of men whispering together in small knots or speaking in subdued tones points to disaffection amongst the rank and file. Too frequent rewards signify that the enemy is at the end of his resources. Too many punishments betray a condition of dire distress. To begin by bluster, but afterwards to take fright at the enemy's number shows a supreme lack of intelligence. When envoys are sent with compliments in their mouths, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. So, 2nd Esdras chapter 15, verse 14 through 17.
You got it on right here? You want me to pull it or you got it?
2nd Esdras chapter 15, verse 14?
14 through 17.
14 through 17. So I got it here.
It's okay.
All right. Book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 15, verse 14. And it reads, "Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up to fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another, they shall not regard their kings nor their princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power." Verse 17, "And men shall desire to go into a city, and shall not be able."
All right, so about that famine earlier, especially with the food shortages and water shortage that's going on right now, with this famine, people are going to start taking matters into their own hands. And the word sedition means rebellion. And when a general authority is weak, and, we got a weak general in the office right now, and that's Joe Schmo Biden. So people are going to start taking matters into their own hands and start, standing up against one another, attacking one another, doing all sorts of things. So, if that's part of a house divided against itself can't stand, roughly paraphrasing. So, next is if the enemy troops march up angrily and remain facing ours for a long time without either joining battle or taking themselves off again, the situation is one that demands great vigilance and circumspection. If our troops are no more in number than the enemy, that is simply sufficient, and it only means that no direct attack can be made. What we can do is simply to concentrate all our available strength to keep a close watch on the enemy and obtain and obtain reinforcements. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 15. So yeah.
This is Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 15. See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise,
So, walking circumspectly, that's using caution. To be, using caution is being wise, just being careful. That goes back into, thinking before you act, knowing what move to make, and what to do, and how to do it. So, next is, he who exercises no forethought but makes light of his opponents is sure to be captured by them. For that one, can you pull Proverbs 22 and 3?
The book of Proverbs, chapter 22. Chapter 22 and verse 3. And it reads, the rich are poor, Slaki, the rich and poor meet together.
Proverbs 22 and 3.
22.
Yeah, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 3.
Chapter 22, verse 3. Okay, Slovakia. I'm like, hold on. All right. This is the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, and verse 3. And it reads, a prudent man foreseeth the evil, and Slovakia, and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished.
So, a wise man, he'll see it come before it happens, and he'll make preparations to make a move so that way he's able to avoid the situation. But those who don't have wisdom, they won't see it coming, and they'll just get caught unawares, and they fall right into the trap, and they pay the price for it. Next it says, if soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive. And unless submissive, they will be practically useless. If when the soldiers have become attached to you, punishments are not enforced, they will still be unless. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in the first instance with humanity, but kept under control by means of iron discipline. This is a certain road to victory. Hebrews 13 and 17.
So Hebrews 13 and verse 17. Obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you.
So, when you come under the rule of another power, you have to, like I said, submit yourself. Once you've been beaten, you've been beaten. To fight back, when it's no use, you're just making it harder for yourself. That's just like that saying goes: if you can't beat them, join them, right? Don't cause any unnecessary stress upon yourself that makes your your defeat that much more humiliating or painful. Just go with it, because now they hold your life in their hands. Next is if in training soldiers' commands are habitually enforced, the army will be well disciplined. If not, its discipline will be bad. If a general shows confidence in his men, but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the gain will be mutual. Hebrews 12 and 11.
This is the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, and verse 11. Chapter 12 and verse 11, and it reads, now no, chastening for the present seemeth to be joy. Chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterwards it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercise thereby. Slakia.
All right, so when you show that goes in the saying. So when you show that discipline, if you want people to follow you, you need to have that discipline to put them in order. And they have to, you show confidence in your men. You give them praise. You treat them as if like they're your family. Yes, they will follow you, but at the same time, you have to give them that chastening, because without chastening, they have no discipline. It's not. It may seem joyous, but it's grievous because they don't have that discipline to listen and do as ordered. So, like with Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, we get chastened, we get corrected, so we can get better. And then that's part of that discipline to get better and to follow orders as directed. Anybody else got anything?
Just goes back into the chastening of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, as well as the counting the cost. You count the cost on the terrain in war. What situation may you be in? So it's just taking heed to all that Yahweh Bashem Yahushai says, and he says it for a reason. That's just.
It's just preparing yourself in for every situation that you may be in. All right. That was the end of chapter 9, the Army on the March of the Art of War series. And with that, we'd like to give all honor, glory, and praise unto
Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakadash. Double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, to all the Akim out there teaching and preaching the truth with 144% sincerity. The next time we say Shalom, Wa Abal Babal. Shalom.
Shalom.